What's up? What's up?
What's up, YouTube family? It's your boy Clem and your girl Hoop
Shan.
sitting on the right side of me. And we gonna make it do what it do today. We got a good one here, called The Truth About George Washington Owning Slaves.
Mm-hmm.
He owned slaves?
He did own some
slaves.
Okay. So we're gonna learn about the truth about that.
GW owned slaves.
Now we know George Washington was first president of the United States.
GW, yeah.
Know him as that. That's how we were taught in school.
What?
I mean, but
what you was taught?
That George Washington was first president of the United States. He's on the dollar bill. So the limited information you were given in school, unless you read outside of those books and
things. Did you ever see anything about him owning slaves?
I have never heard that mentioned in a book. Matter of fact, thinking about it, in high school, don't remember hearing it. College, don't remember hearing it in any of the history classes that I took. No, don't remember hearing about it. I'm sorry. I just had to go back in my thought process.
So now you're about to get the information.
So we're going to get the truth about George Washington owning slaves.
Right?
Yes.
All right, let's
get into it.
In this presentation, we will bring to you the stand of one of the founding fathers of the United States, George Washington, as regard to slavery. This extract is gotten from the book, Black Rednecks and White Liberals by Dr. Thomas Sowell. George Washington was one of those who had inherited slaves, and, dying childless, freed his slaves in his will, effective on the death of his wife. His will also provide that slaves too old or too beset with bodily infirmities, not able to take care of themselves, should be taken care of by his estate, and that the children were to be taught to read in his estate. In fact, he continued to pay for the support of some freed slaves, for decades after his death, in accordance with his will. And the tone, as well as the length of it, showed his concerns. The Emancipation Clause stands out from the rest of Washington's will, in the unique forcefulness of its language. Elsewhere in it, Washington used the standard legal expressions, I give and bequeath, it is my will and direction. In one instance he politely wrote, by way of advice, I recommend to my executors. But the Emancipation Clause rings with the voice of command. It has the iron firmness of a field order. I do hereby expressly forbid the sale of any slave I may die possessed of, under any pretext whatsoever. Long before reaching this point in his personal life, George Washington had said of slavery as a national issue, there is not a man living who wishes more sincerely than I do to see a plan adopted for the abolition of it. But, like Burke, he saw a need for a plan of some sort, rather than simply freeing millions of slaves in a newly emerging nation surrounded by threatening powers, just as the freed slaves themselves would be surrounded by a hostile population. In short, the moral principle was easy, but figuring out how to apply it in practice was not. Moreover, in a country with an elected government, how the white population at large felt could not be ignored. When Washington congratulated Lafayette for the latter's purchase of a plantation where former slaves could live, he added, would to God a like spirit would diffuse itself generally into the minds of the people of this country, but I despair of seeing it. He saw legislation as the only way to end slavery and said that a legislator who did that would get his vote. Slaves that Washington took north with him after completing his terms as president, in effect freeing them, on the sly, as one biographer put it, at a time when to free them officially could have set off controversies. George Washington was, after all, trying to hold together a fragile coalition of states bearing little resemblance to the world power that the United States would become in later centuries. As a slave owner in Virginia, Washington thought of ways he might sublet much of his estate, in which his current slaves might be hired by the year, as laborers by tenant farmers. He was clearly casting about for some way, as he put it in a letter, to liberate a certain species of property which I possess very repugnantly to my own feelings. But there were no takers. Washington's behavior as a slave owner is also worth noting. Beginning in the early 1770s, he rarely bought a slave and he would not sell one, unless the slave consented, which never happened. Not selling slaves was an economic loss. Slave labor on a plantation with soil as poor as Mount Vernon brought in little or nothing. The only profit a man in his position would make was by selling slaves to states where agriculture was more flourishing. Washington would not. I am principled against selling Negroes as you would do cattle at a market. From 1775 until his death, the slave population at Mount Vernon more than doubled. Even a sympathetic biography of George Washington, for example, said, he had helped to create a new world but had allowed into it an infection that he feared would eventually destroy it. This statement is breathtaking in its assumptions. That he feared would eventually destroy it. Even to have made slavery a public issue at the time would have accomplished nothing except to jeopardize the survival of a fragile coalition of newly independent states. Yet this man who contributed more than anyone else to the introduction of free republican government in the modern world is widely seen as being under a moral cloud, as if he had chosen to introduce or abet slavery. Washington's actual behavior illustrated what Adam Smith had said decades earlier, in his theory of moral sentiments, that a man prompted by humanity and benevolence, when he cannot establish the right, will not disdain to ameliorate the wrong. If you like this kind of material, please subscribe to help us reach more people.
Okay, well, like I said before, did not know that. But it's the fact that, okay, so they mentioned that after his wife died, of course, he agreed to free slaves in his will, of course, when he passed away.
Yeah.
So that his slaves could, immediately be free.
But the thing is, he was saying that in 1770 that, he said in 1770, he would, if the slaves wanted to be, sent somewhere else, right, they would have to be up under their consent. You know what I'm saying? So he gave him a choice.
So he gave him a choice, but nobody wanted to leave because, again, if you were told, or even if his slaves didn't have knowledge that they would be freed once he, passed away or was in their will, of course, why would I say, oh, okay, I want to be sold? Yeah. It won't make any sense.
Especially if the person treated you right.
Yeah.
Outside of where you at, somebody else down the street, they slave on them,
Yeah.
And
it wasn't even about the money with that. That's, it wasn't even an issue of, it said what Mount Vernon didn't make as much money as other plantations did. So you see his heart for people at that time. Yeah. They may have had a value.
He was just trying to figure out how do I end this?
Yes.
He was looking at humanity. How do I end this? Mm-hmm. But it was kind of hard to figure out because you have so many slaves, and he realized if I let them do it now, it's gonna be some riots.
Yeah.
And the riots is not tearing up buildings. It's gonna be killing people. You know what I'm saying? Before the slave owner freed his slave, before I get my slave up, that's how they failed. I take them out.
Yeah. Which is sad.
That is sad.
But it was just eye-opening to hear that he put that in his will to free these people. And of course he didn't buy. It didn't say he bought slaves. It said he inherited. Mm-hmm. So this is slaves that he had from passed down to him.
Okay.
I mean, could he have let them go? Would he inherit them? I guess so.
Let them go where though?
But right, that's true.
There's no way you can
and
go.
then again, the backlash that he could have received had he did that. But again, he did put it in his will to free them instead of having, them go to like the state or however it goes because he didn't have any kids.
Yeah.
So, wow, that's some knowledge. Did not know that.
Well, before we go, I want to say something though. Before we go, this woman here, man. She push play. No, I ain't have my headphones on. Just push play. You do me like that. She did. And y'all just don't know. She was smiling on this side. I can hear a little chuck. Because I'm sitting here thinking about the old way we do things, and my mind wasn't thinking to put the headphones on. And she push play. I'm like, oh, this woman push play. It's all good. It is all good in the hood.
And my kids say one day, Miss Gibson, you got an evil witch laugh. No, I don't.
We gonna put your odds and that house fall on you.
Oh my God!
Watch your curls.
My
your
toes
curl
my toes curly in. All right, YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. Continue to check us out.
You did me wrong.
Peace.